Hey guys, my name is Andre Salazar and you're watching The Art of Comics. Today, part 1 of Alex Toth. Boom, that's it, we're doing it. So, as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of Alex Toth. Here's one of my little press possessions. This is a little sketch by Alex Toth. You know, he did these little on envelopes and stuff. It's just tiny. There's nothing so special about it. It was cheap, but huge fan of Alex Toth. So I talk about him. I've talked about him before. He's one of my, art parents. One of the people I've looked to get inspiration for. One of my favorite artists of all time. We're going to talk about book 1, book 2, and 3 of these massive freaking IDW Alex Toth books. Okay, that's what we're going to do. Now, this is going to be a freaking big ass series, okay? So this ain't gonna be something quick and easy. We're gonna break these down, not just go through the books, but we're gonna talk about Alex and all his stuff, okay? So the first one we're gonna do, we're gonna start with number 1, okay? Genius Isolated, and we're gonna talk about his life, his comics, and we're definitely gonna talk about the comics, and we're gonna be using these books as a way to kind of like go through that. Huge fan, so much, dude, to talk about. And so this will be part 1, and I don't know how many these are going to take to make. It's going to be a while, but I'm going to try to make them short. So my goal is to do maybe like 15-minute videos of these Alex Toths, and we'll do like a little series. It'll be like the Toth series, blah, blah, blah. That's my objective. So let's go down and talk about Alex Toth, who is one of the best, one of the most curmudgeon-y comic guys, infamously in every way out there. Let's do it, okay? Boom. Hey everybody, we're on episode 1, part 1 of Alex Toth. And those of you who have been watching me for a while know that Alex Toth is one of my favorite artists of all time. And this is going to be a comic book series about Alex Toth. I'm going to be focusing using mostly these big books by IDW, these mamas. It was a trilogy of books, and then I'll probably use some other books every now and then. So let's get into part 1, Alex Toth, okay? And we're going to just kind of step by step this book here. This will be kind of like our guide through the life and artwork of this guy, and he is one of my faves. These are just great pages here. We could just stop here and just look at the shapes, the composition, the form that he's putting, and the great line work. So he is definitely a genius with the high level of skill and hours and dedication that it takes to get such skill. It's usually a trade-off in some ways. And this book does go into that a little bit as far as his family life, his upbringing, some of his relationships, things like that. And that's something that happens a lot of times. Mark Chiarello, he talks about how he was good friends with Toth for a while, and then eventually, Toth is known for 2 things. He talks about being a brilliant artistic ability, and also his curmudgeonness, right? And how he was such a pain in the ass to people. And so he talks about that and how he lost a lot of his relationships with people, and even Mark's relationship he lost. And then he, towards the end of his life, he's able to kind of repair that and get back with Mark and Alex. But it's just fascinating to see this guy's life and how brilliant and highly regarded he is amongst his peers and the people in comics. And also like his personality and how powerful that was as well. So these are great little stills and stuff. This is from an animation cell called Space Angel in 1962. I don't know Space Angel. I don't know if it was just like a pilot or what they did. So we start talking up. Isn't that great? Too? we start talking about his youth and where he comes from. Now his family, his mother and father are both Middle Europeans from Hungary. So they immigrated here into the States, and he was born in a part of Manhattan, New York, I think it was called Yorkshire. It's here somewhere. I think it's called Yorkshire. It's a part of Manhattan, and that's where he was born, and he kind of was raised in New York. And there's a picture of him and his family right there. It's kind of cool. Some neat little photos here. It talks about his father. His father was a singer and a performer. Sander was his name. Sander was a performer, a singer, not very successful performer, but he would, go out, he would sing, he played instruments out at night, and there is a kind of a hint of some alcoholism. He was out catting around a bit too. So it seems as though Alex was a little closer to his mother in that regard as far as just the home life. But also, his father was the performer, entertainer, and the arts guy. His mom was a little more stern. He probably took more from his mom's personality and was a little bit more strict and things like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So it talks about, and a lot of this is from like third person or like, not from the source, but from Alex's children. So they kind of filled in a lot of these gaps, Alex's kids, because he was passed away when these books came out. So they went to his family and estate to kind of get some of this information about Sander and Mary Elizabeth. Mary Elizabeth is his mom's name. So, and so this was, showing pictures of the 30s and 40s and things like that. This is some of his first art as a kid. I mean, he was... in his teens, and he created these really cool kind of posters for these like wrestlers. And if you look at that, it's really kind of a neat, just again, very simple. I'm going to use that word a lot, simple, and I don't mean that in a bad way at all, but it's just brilliantly clear. And I just really like this stuff. This actually looks like Knief stuff. We're going to get into Knief in a little bit, how that was a big inspiration for him, but this kind of reminds me of Knief. And I like this because he talks about, this is one of the L trains in Manhattan, and what's cool about this is you really get to see the shadows, and you see how light and dark play amongst each other, and the idea is that this kind of environment and these kind of things really shaped Alex's way of looking at things and looking at art and things like that. And so I thought that was kind of a cool look at looking at the artist's environment and influences and influences the art, right, and the artist and how they draw. So I thought that was kind of a cool like image. So it talks about, back in the late 30s, what was really popular before comics even was radio plays. And so we get into that Little Orphan Annie, that's like the decoder ring that you see in like a Christmas Story. So he was into, The Shadow, Little Orphan Annie, all these kind of Buck Rogers, Batman and Robin, all these kind of audio adventures like Batman and Robin, Superman, Terry and the Pirates, Flash Gordon. Those all kind of influenced or were the seeds of his imaginations. As he would lay down, listening to the radio, he would draw, from his imagination of what he's imagining, these characters and things like that. And so it's kind of neat to kind of see how that was an influence. Of course, movies, but more the radio because movies were expensive and things like that. Another thing was interesting was his mother really did kind of help promote and inspire him to continue his drawing. and his mom would draw with him, and his mom always drew the same kind of drawing. He talks about here how his mom would doodle the same girl in the same position, the same headshot every time. And so I thought that was interesting that his mom drew a little bit, but it was always the same exact thing. Here's some shots of Errol Flynn and Zorro, things like that. Here's a picture that Alex did of the Shadow, one of his childhood interests. There he is, high school graduation. So not only was he this kind of like only child, I didn't state that before, he was an only child, and both his parents were working, and so he was at home, a latchkey kid, trying to figure out how to draw, and he got some comics. Some teachers gave him comics. When he went to school, his teachers had this like kind of reward system that the best kid, the best boy, the best girl would get a comic, and so he would try to get those, and that kind of like spurred on this interest. And his family in the junior high offered this idea of going to this kind of a special school. It was a school, the High School of Industrial Arts. So Alex went to this high school that was for illustration. That was kind of like a major, so to speak, in high school. And that would be their like vocation, industrial study, design, that kind of stuff. And so that's what he did. And that's where he met a lot of other people. And this school, SIA, which is the School of Industrial Arts, a lot of people went there. He talked about Joe Orlando, Dick Gordiano, Neil Adams, Art Spiegelman, Joe Jusko, John Romita Sr., like a lot of these comic guys that we know of that are like the early comic book professionals, kind of came from this school, which I thought was kind of neat. Here is one of Knief's Terry and the Pirates. We're going to see more of him in a bit, but if you look at some of this does give you that kind of Toth look. You'll see, this was Walsh Tubbs. This is Terry and the Pirates. But if you look at the stuff, you kind of can see some Toth in there. And, this is what he's using to kind of crib, to copy, to kind of like learn from, right? That's what you do as a kid. Even as an adult, you can do that as you copy, you learn, you try to figure out what is he doing here, why is he putting the shadow over the ear, all these things, and you kind of like ape it and you kind of put it in your vocabulary. So he meets this guy, Frank Robbins, and Frank Robbins is like a mentor of his, and he kind of like takes him under his wing, and Frank Robbins is a professional artist. He took over after Noel Sickles for Scorchy Smith, and he did some work, I think, with Eisner and things like that. So Sickles, if you do not know Noel Sickles, then you got to learn Noel Sickles. This is another book by IDW, Scorchy Smith, The Art of Noel Sickles. So my big favorites are Alex Toth, Robert Fawcett, Noel Sickles, these guys. If you don't know Fawcett, let me grab that real quick. Robert Fawcett is brilliant. This is like Illustrator, Collier's, things like that. This guy was considered a master. I mean, by maybe should we do a video on him in this book? It is, oh look, little thing from prior. This guy was brilliant. He is one of my favorites. Maybe we'll do a video on him too sometime, because his stuff, look at this. Oh gosh, I love this stuff. I mean, you can see like Bernie Fuchs in here. You can see Bob Peak, everybody. These guys, look at this stuff. I mean, this stuff was brilliant. Anyway, so Fawcett, Toth gets to know Fawcett. So he becomes kind of a student of his as well. But Noel Sickles is another guy who is brilliant. And this book goes into all his work. And he did a series called Scorchy Smith, which is this stuff here. And this, he did it after Knief, and this stuff is brilliant. So we got Sickles doing this strip, and that's this here, and that's what Alex kind of gets into. Big fan of Noel Sickles in every freaking way. He's way up there. He's brilliant. So yeah, you gotta have that. Here's another really cool drawing. I just really like the line work here, and we're gonna see some more of his stuff, his early comics. He just these little bits. So what happened was he, because of that high school for the arts, industrial arts, he got a job for the Society of Illustrators. Now, Society of Illustrators is the Robert Fawcett, John Whitcomb, later on, Bertie Fuse, but who else? Al Parker. All those guys are all illustrators, right? They're doing things like Saturday Evening Post, Collier's, all these magazines. Before photography, they did drawings, right? And so that's the Society of Illustrators in New York. Alex gets a job there. I think he's like a page type of a role. I'm not sure. It wasn't doing art. It was just kind of like helping out. But this is where he met Fawcett and some of those guys. And so he's there. He kind of like meets the artist. He's kind of like getting in that world, trying to get these opportunities to learn. He would share his portfolio. People would rip it apart. He got upset about it. He talks about getting his work reviewed by Jack Cole, who created Plastic Man. He shows him the portfolio. Jack Cole says, "Hey man, you need help with this. We got problems here. You need to work. And Alex was so upset. He grabbed the portfolio. He left the building. He ripped it up and threw it in the trash. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of anger you have to do that. But he was that mad. He was just so brokenhearted that he wasn't good enough. But that also inspired him to work hard and do the hours needed to get the job. So that's what he did. He went home, he busted his ass, and he became better, right? Okay, so not only was he into the comic strips and movies and radio shows, but he's also really getting into artwork and illustrations, things like that. Probably mostly because he's right there, working and kind of being around these giant artists at the Society of Illustrators. But some of these other artists who were not there, who are like European and things, he would get these postcards and movie and playbills, things like that, and kind of study them. So here's just some other great things. And when you look at this, they're putting this in here because it's got this, you can see Toth's getting inspiration from these. You could have said Toth did all these and I would have agreed with you, especially this one, even all these. But the line, the shape, the composition and contrast with dark and light, it's just brilliant. The empty space here and this line work. This is like, it doesn't look like Hal Foster. This looks like something that Alex Toth would do. So really cool to see, again, these inspirations that he had, like that too. That's great. That's like, reminds you of some of those Zorro stuff, right? So he was into Al Dorn too. So Al Dorn, just a lot of these different illustrators of the day. So he was inspired by the comics, the radio shows, and then the artists, the illustrators of that era. And now we're talking about the next chapter goes on to getting his first kind of gigs in comics and just doing 1 or 2 pages for people. And we get to see now some comics. We get to see his work. And what was interesting was when he got paid for the comics, he would give all the money to his mother, and then his mother would give him allowance out of that money, out of his money. That caused some issues, because if Alex wanted to go on a date, he would have to ask his mother to give him some money to go on the date when it was actually his money that he earned, right? Because he kind of supported his mom, which I thought was kind of an interesting dynamic there. This is he says this is like his oldest artwork. I'm not really sure by what he means by that, but because I don't think it's his oldest, but it's brilliant. I mean, this is like one of his first things, and this is, look at the line quality, look at the different tools he's using. He's not using brush for everything. He's using these micron, these like Rapidograph, tech pens. He's using brush, the line, the positioning. This here, this is great too. I love those clouds. And the blacks is just really wonderful. And then here's a small little story too. This looks a little more rougher. This is definitely, you can see, inspired of that era, that time, and the things that he's kind of absorbing from other artists. I mean, that's probably a little bit overly done, right? But it looks pretty darn cool. And here's a short story, one of his first ones he ever did. And even though you'd say some of the positioning might be a little wonky or stiff or whatever, but it's actually really cool. It really, really is neat. I think he lettered this himself, but I'm not sure about that. I can't tell you on that part. But just really cool compositions too. The way this is all going through. This is kind of a neat, I don't know. He did that because he needed space for that, but it actually looks kind of cool in the way that's kind of done. Yeah, really neat. Really neat piece. Here's another one for the Merry Flight. I would like to see this in black and white, actually. I think it would probably work a little better. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I love this because it's so early, but it looks so cool. I don't know. I mean, you could see a lot of the alt artists now that are, or in the 80s, you can see Burns or, all these artists that are doing like Fantagraphics type stuff. You can see that in here. You can see this really clean line, that brush line is just so like smooth and clean on the outside. And then even this here, the feathering, just great line work. And it's probably a little overly done, there's a lot going on, but it's not super distracting. This is really good here. Those faces are wonderful, right? Yeah, big fan of that stuff. Jimmy Wakely. Look at that. And this is a great one too. This is like a classic. The positioning, the darkness, look at how that stands out. The silhouette is perfect there. He could have done them both without silhouette. He did the one, just really neat. And then this guy here. Really great stuff. So we're going to stop here. Just a quick video. This is part 1. We're going to keep going. We're going to get into a lot more comics, a lot more stuff, and talk more about Alex Toth. So part 1. Thank you very much. Hey guys, thanks for watching and listening, and subscribe and click that bell icon so you are notified when the next Alex Toth is coming up. I got more videos coming up too. So every Tuesday and Saturday. Thanks a lot. Be careful out there. Take care.